One of the things I've appreciated about living in Kingston for the last 9 years is that our Pride Parade, while not hugely political, has at least managed to escape the worst kinds of corporatization that one sees in bigger cities. We also don't have the battalions of queer police officers, corrections workers and soldiers that seem to make up an ever-increasing percentage of the contingents here in Toronto. All this changed this past Saturday when, for the first time in the 19-year history of the parade, the Canadian military sent an official delegation. Their presence was marked not simply by individual personnel marching in uniform, but by an enormous tank that drove down the street with us. In conversations with mutually astonished friends who had convened the martial training several nights before, I learned that the Pride Committee had been more concerned about including the occupied contingent than they had the armoured personnel carrier. And in fact, the tank had been welcomed into the parade without any comment or discussion, apparently. When I spoke with people who were less perturbed than I, they suggested almost without exception that maybe painting the tank pink would fix the problem. By, I suppose, making its presence less ominous and more campy. The suggestion that to literally pinkwash the vehicle would alleviate the discomfort that myself and others felt with the militarization of our parade intimated an eagerness to overlook what this weapon represents and enacts. It also reflects, I think, the incredible symbolic weight that pink as an alibi for gay pride maintains when it's unhinged from any history or any complex notion of identity. So my work on breast cancer responds to a similar and related problem, the corporatization of the social movement around the disease and the use of public concern about its prevalence to render invisible a whole spectrum of experiences and power relations that don't fit within the tyranny of cheerfulness that defines contemporary pink ribbon culture. As resistance to social inequalities, environmental racism, and the medical industrial complex has been driven from the mainstream movement's agenda, breast cancer has become what Adweek calls a dream cause, which can be attached to a seemingly infinite range of concerns, both corporate and governmental. And little did I know when I began researching this issue 13 years ago that my work would lead me to confront a situation in which breast cancer awareness is mobilized to further the interests of the US and its allies in the Middle East. So in the remarks that follow, I'm going to talk about how it is that breast cancer activism came to be appropriated by what I call a free market feminism, corporate feminism, a feminism for profit, on behalf of an imperialist foreign policy. And exploiting rather than securing women's health, this particular instance of pinkwashing works together with military and market intervention in the region at the same time that it makes it really hard to see that that's what it's doing, that this is part of a military and an economic strategy of domination in the region. And like Israeli pinkwashing, it trades in images of modernity and as Natalie referenced at the beginning, this idea that we somehow are, more advanced than they are, or that Israel is more advanced than its neighbors. And it does so in ways that bolster the concerns of the U.S., its allies, in the form of Canada and the UK, but also its autocratic allies in the region. So, in order to understand how breast cancer came to be viewed as an appropriate vehicle to advance U.S. interests in the Middle East, it's necessary to reflect a little bit on the history of breast cancer emerging as this philanthropic cause par excellence here in this region of the world. And over the past 3 decades, large foundations and corporations and government agencies have worked together to reconfigure breast cancer from this highly stigmatized disease that was best thought dealt with privately in isolation to, for a kind of small period of time, a neglected epidemic that was worthy of public debate and political organizing, to a situation now where for the most part it's understood as this enriching and affirming experience in which people with the disease they're never patients, or people with the disease, they're always survivors. And in that latter stage, the figure of the breast cancer survivor has been used to elicit individual and corporate giving, and we are led as consumers to believe that if we just keep throwing out money at this disease, we'll succeed in winning the fight. It's very hard to get away from the military language in talking about breast cancer, I'm afraid, so you'll have to excuse that. But we'll win the fight against the disease if we just keep buying these products. The sometimes farcical nature of the pink ribbon phenomenon reached new heights in 2010 I came across this advertisement for a breast cancer gun, which has, I don't know if you can see, but there's an awareness ribbon engraved on the slide. And the bubblegum pink grip is interchangeable, so you can kind of accessorize and you don't feel like having a pink gun every day that you leave your home. The saving lives by taking lives logic of the pink ribbon pistol seems only slightly less mind-boggling when one considers that over the past 2 decades, millions of people have become enthusiastic consumers of a slew of potentially harmful products ranging from toxic cosmetics to household cleaning products to oil rigs. The Canadian Breast Cancer Foundation receives money from this company that makes oil rigs in Alberta, and they have this campaign called Tough Enough, drilling for the cure. Breast cancer has become what I think of as a consummate free market cause, and that's a term used by a feminist scholar called Chandra Mohanty. And like all good practitioners of free market principles, the breast cancer industry has recently begun to pursue initiatives overseas in new geographic locales as they seek to expand the market for breast cancer treatments and the fruits of pharmaceutical research and pink ribbon products, but also for a particular ideology about how to approach the disease, and I'm going to argue for a particular ideology about how to organize the world. And major players are involved. AstraZeneca, which is the maker of the best-selling cancer drug tamoxifen, and it also created Breast Cancer Awareness Month, now has international campaigns. The Susan Komen for the Cure Foundation has a very fancy international headquarters and does a lot of work, as you shall see, in the Middle East. The cosmetics giant Avon, and then Estee Lauder, which since 1999 has been lighting up sites and monuments around the world with pink lights in October. Sites in the Middle East have included the Burj Al Arab Hotel in Dubai. The Komen Foundation is responsible for lighting the pyramids and the old city of Jerusalem. And when they lit the pyramids, they did so in conjunction with General Electric, which, as you probably know, is a weapons manufacturer, as well as the largest producer of mammography equipment in the world. So within this context, the U.S. Middle East Partnership for Breast Cancer Awareness marked the U.S. government's first foray into transnational breast cancer policy. It was announced in 2006, and it's a public-private venture, which is a sub-project of this basically propaganda program that's run out of the State Department, which is called the Middle East Partnership Initiative. And in the Breast Cancer Partnership are the Komen Foundation, Avon, the MD Anderson Cancer Center, Johns Hopkins University, and a variety of cancer care and business organizations in the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Jordan, Morocco, Yemen, and Palestine. This photograph, which was taken at the Sheikh Khalifa Medical City in Abu Dhabi in October 2007, shows Laura Bush who became the ambassador for the program. And here she's meeting with Emirati breast cancer survivors on the first of 2 diplomacy visits that she made to the region towards the end of George W. Bush's second term in office. And this partnership has resulted in the creation of a number of programs, including the dubiously titled Making It Our Business campaign in Dubai, which has the dual aim of, quote, saving lives and enhancing the concept of corporate social responsibility by encouraging companies to launch awareness programs and offer free screening to employees. And this is despite the fact that Dubai already has in place a free mammography service, which is available to all its citizens and non-residents, expats, free of charge and with no identification required. And that's true of much of the healthcare system there. So one of the things that's actually going on with this campaign is a kind of a borrowing or a tunneling of U.S. private interests into public interests. The Train the Trainer program, which operates in the UAE, Dubai, and Jordan, teaches employees of multinationals to spread the message of breast cancer screening at work, and participating companies include General Electric again, General Motors, and Johnson & Johnson. And the goal of that program is to mitigate the effects of breast cancer on employees of the company, and also teach employees about the benefits of public-private partnerships and cause-related marketing, so selling products to raise money for X or Y charitable cause. And then they also run this thing called Course for the Cure, which is a program that brings women from Saudi Arabia to the US, and this is, in Laura Bush's words, to learn all the things that Komen does in the United States. The pink ribbon, the Races for the Cure, all the ways the word gets out to remind American women to be screened. Back in the Middle East, the number of breast cancer awareness events has mushroomed since the launch of the partnership. Although most of the official activity of the partnership is concentrated in the Gulf states, the Komen Foundation has also been busy at work in Egypt and Israel. They held their first Middle Eastern Race for the Cure event in 2009 among the pyramids, and the event was announced internationally through a press release, which claimed that Komen was, quote, expanding its global breast cancer mission to Egypt by working under the patronage of Suzanne Mubarak, then First Lady of Egypt, the Breast Cancer Foundation of Egypt, the Suzanne Mubarak Regional Cancer Center for Women's Health and Development, the Suzanne Mubarak Women's International Peace Movement. She really liked putting her names on things, I guess. And the United States Agency for International Development. Official documents also note that Egypt was selected by Komen, and this is Nancy Brinker, who is the, right now actually embattled CEO of the Komen Foundation. Komen picked Egypt because, quote, its need, relative political and economic stability, and the willingness of high-ranking government officials and many non-government officials to work together in building capacity to address its high breast cancer mortality rates. End quote. So the Egypt Race for the Cure was supposed to become an annual event, and it did in fact take place for a second year in 2010. And I guess Samsung had signed up to sponsor it for a few years, but it hasn't been staged since the revolution. A testament to my sense, which I have not been able to verify, that Komen and the US government are only interested in working with authoritarian regimes in the region. The first Race for the Cure in Israel took place in 2010, and it was organized through a partnership between Komen, the City of Jerusalem, and Hadassah, the Women's Zionist Organization of America. The route took participants around the walls of the old city. The event was widely covered and mindlessly celebrated within and outside of Israel as an event that is, quote, and this was the headline in a GTA article, which is like the Jewish global news agency, as bridging the gap between cultures. That's how it was described in the headline. As my friend and colleague Ellen Leopold, who's a historian who's written a lot about relationship between the military and breast cancer research, and she's also done activist solidarity work in Palestine, noted in a letter to the JTA that coverage created the impression that Palestinian women from the West Bank or Gaza were involved in the race when they were very likely not. Rather, the invention included some Israeli Arab women, that is, citizens of Israel. Leopold argues in the letter that the suggestion that the Coleman event generated mutual goodwill not only blurs the distinction between Palestinians living in the West Bank and Gaza and Arab Israelis, it also ignores the discrimination towards the latter within Israel itself, which makes access to quality medical care problematic for many Arab Israelis. At the same time that these kind of awareness events paper over those kinds of social injustices, and they do that here too, and they do that in the US and in the UK, they also advance a particular ideology about how populations should be structured and governed. And so one of the things that really interests me about these partnerships, I think we should be worried about, is the public-private mandate of them, which suggests that corporate philanthropy and private giving are morally and economically viable, but also preferable way to respond to social needs in the place of the state's responsibility for mitigating the destructive effects of capitalism. And they serve to further privatize public spheres around the world by encouraging people not to express their engagement with the world critically and to take on structures of power, but to engage with privately sponsored educational research initiatives. So this process is referred to by critics such as Isla Jad and Shahzad Mohab and Nala Abdo as NGOization. These authors suggest that the professionalization and institutionalization of Arab social movements and the infiltration of non-profit organizations into multiple aspects of everyday life over the past 2 decades can be directly linked to recent military interventions in the region, US military interventions in the region. So the number of NGOs has skyrocketed from 175,000 in 1995 to 225,000 in 2003, many of which are funded, most of which are funded from the US. Figures compiled by the Brookings Institute show that in 2009 alone, the level of what they call annual US democracy aid in the Middle East was more than the total amount spent between 1991 to 2001. In diplomacy and development circles, non-governmental projects like these breast cancer campaigns and partnerships are promoted as equivalent to positive social change, no matter what they're actually doing. But in the Arab world, NGOization has unleashed a heated debate. In Jad's words, NGOs have been viewed as a new and growing form of dependency on the West and as a tool for it to expand its hegemony. And indeed, the Middle East Partnership Initiative, which is the umbrella project of the Breast Cancer Partnership, was launched in 2003 in the run-up to the invasion of Iraq. And it was then Secretary of State Colin Powell introduced it, and he said when he did so that it had the goal of deepening a long-standing commitment to working with all peoples of the Middle East to improve their daily lives and to help them face the future with hope. But a 2005 congressional report, which you can find right online, suggested that large sectors of the peoples of the Middle East had not responded well to the initiative. And so a handful of governments apparently welcomed the funds, but others in Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Oman apparently were less enthusiastic. And meanwhile, the unofficial response, which was conveyed largely through the press, or at least that's the response, the unofficial response I've had access to, was largely negative. An editorial in the Beirut-based Al Safiya newspaper, for example, claimed that the purpose of the partnership was to, quote, link the ambitions of some people in the Arab world to the objectives of the United States, not the objectives of the United States to the ambitions of people in the Arab world. And it was 1 year after this skeptical congressional report came out that the breast cancer program was rolled out. And Laura Bush had a 30% higher approval rating than her husband at the time, and so she was picked as its figurehead. And during her first visit to the program, to the Middle East to promote the program, she spoke to a group of students about the project, and she, quote, asked them not to believe everything they watch on TV or hear about the US. And expressed her hope that the partnership would illustrate for Middle Easterners, quote, the positive character of US culture. In addition to propagandizing for US interests, bringing this depoliticized, corporatized, and individualized version of an issue to play in contexts such as Egypt and Palestine helps further undermine the work of feminist social movements there that have already been compromised by what Hanafi and Tabar refer to as an advocacy workshops and training programs approach to mobilizing women. Law Professor Catherine Frank, who participated in the LGBTQI solidarity delegation that went to Palestine in January 2012, also alerts us to how such strategies work to pathologize local cultures. She says foreign support for the Palestinians in the form of money, aid workers, and teams of experts, myself included, that's her, not me, pour into Palestine seeking to improve the lives of women. Millions of dollars, euros, or yen are easily available so long as gender rights frame the scope of work. But by gender, the donors really mean women. Just as with gays, Palestinian culture is understood as toxic and dangerous. Thus, Israel traffics in gay rights to pinkwash its international reputation, while the donor community estrogen washes virtually all of its work in Palestine. In both cases, the backwardness, in quotes, of Palestinian culture and tradition justifies the intervention of others to save its women and gays. Pro-woman but not feminist, empowered but not enraged, sisterly but not collective, and thoroughly disarticulated from questions pertaining to sexual identity, racialization, colonialism, or class dynamics. The culture of US breast cancer survivorship represents a potent export. Like it really is the perfect thing in this geopolitical climate. And if NGOization results in a situation where women's issues, or so-called women's issues, are presented as if they're suspended in air, this is a quote from Jad, disconnected from other interests and needs, the US version of breast cancer awareness came with that guarantee built in, embedded within it. The selection of breast cancer as a diplomatic tool was well thought out and intentional, but it has very little to do with the realities of women's health and the place of breast cancer therein across the locales in which it operates. Recent statistics suggest that Arab women in the region have among the lowest rates of breast cancer in the world. I'm not suggesting that breast cancer is a non-issue for women in the Middle East, but rather I'm pointing to a lack of evidence that the leaders of this partnership actually have paid any attention to figuring out what women's health concerns might be or where breast cancer fits into those priorities. And also, as Barbara Brenner, a breast cancer activist, says in the film that Natalie referred to at the beginning, you know, basically what this is about is taking really bad messages and ineffective approach to breast cancer and exporting it somewhere else, because it doesn't work. We have similar incidence rates and mortality rates as we did 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago. And we don't know what we're doing, though we pretend that we do. And so, or they pretend that they do. In this context, I think the partnership might be viewed as contributing to a culture of breast cancer risk in the region and hence to building and expanding market for the breast cancer industries. To sum up, I think what we're witnessing here is the appropriation of breast cancer activism via free market / civil society / missionary feminism, which is articulated to an imperialist foreign policy. And the aim of this policy is not simply to wage war in the name of promoting formal liberal democratic institutions or unseating select dictators, but is focused on advancing and consolidating the values and practices of individualism and the free market and private property. And the Komen Foundation and their allies in the corporate sector work with the state to promote values and practices which are legitimated through this renormalized idea that empire represents a plausible and proper basis for hope, stability, and democracy. And they do so with impunity for many reasons, but I think in this particular case because it's very hard to criticize good intentions in charitable works. and it sort of puts breast cancer awareness beyond reproach. People think if you're against this kind of breast cancer awareness that you're, for cancer or against women or something like that. And proponents of breast cancer awareness repeatedly claim that it's external to politics and it transcends all these terrible things like racism, but that really erases the power relations that undergird it. And I think that it's really important to make visible the exploitation and exclusion that structure these kinds of campaigns and the pinkwashing through which they are enabled. Thanks.